Welcome to Sayers and Secrets. Tonight's mystery begins not with violence, but with a door left ever so slightly ajar, and the consequences that slipped quietly through it. Settle in and let the shadows speak. I was halfway through dictating a letter to a client who didn't deserve the stationery when the sound of a hinge I hadn't touched decided to make its opinion known. The front door creaked open. That was wrong. Doors in Wolfe's house didn't open themselves, and certainly not the one that led to his orchid-scented sanctum of peace. Fritz was in the kitchen, the mail was sorted, and I hadn't heard the bell, which meant somebody had come in through a door I was sure I'd locked. I turned, pen still in hand, and saw a sliver of daylight slice the hallway rug. Wolfe looked up from his chair, his lips forming the kind of frown that could make a court stenographer confess. "Archie," he said, slow as molasses in judgment, "is the front door under your jurisdiction?" "Last I checked, yes. But the defense will argue it was compromised by an unknown party." I got up and crossed the office, the smell of Fritz's beef stock fighting with the faint chill sneaking in from outside. The door stood open just wide enough to let in October air. And trouble. She was standing on the stoop, about 30, wearing a trench coat that had seen better rain. Her hand was still on the knob, her eyes a kind of desperate polite. "I'm sorry," she said. "I knocked. The door, it wasn't latched." "You're not the first to come in uninvited," I told her, "but you may be the first to apologize before crossing the carpet. Come in." She hesitated, then stepped inside, shutting the door as if afraid it might accuse her. Wolfe hadn't moved, but his eyes had narrowed to pinpoints of amber calculation. "State your business," he said, "and please do not leave fingerprints on the chair." She took it anyway. "My name is Marion Lockwood. My brother, he's missing, and I think someone means to make sure he stays that way." I went to my desk, flipped open the notebook. "Police?" "They told me to wait. They said adults disappear all the time." Her voice cracked, just enough to prove she hadn't practiced it. But he left something behind, something he shouldn't have. Wolfe sighed, the kind that moved more air than sympathy. "Miss Lockwood, I detest mysteries introduced with ellipses. Please be explicit." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small brass key attached to a hotel tag that read, "Harrington Arms, room 312. This was in his mailbox yesterday. No note, no sign of him since last Thursday. I wrote it down, noting the tremor in her hand and the smudge of red polish chipped at the edge of her thumb. "And the door I left unlocked?" I asked. She blinked. "What do you mean?" "That's how you got in," I said. "Except I didn't leave it that way." "Which means somebody else did." Wolfe's brows drew together like twin storm fronts. "Archie, kindly secure the premises. If our domestic architecture is being tampered with, I should like to eliminate burglars before breakfast." I went to the hallway, checked the latch. It wasn't broken. It was merely turned, cleanly, quietly. Someone had been careful. Too careful. When I came back, Miss Lockwood was perched on the edge of the red leather chair like a student caught copying notes. Wolfe had taken to examining the key through his magnifier, holding it with the disdain he usually reserved for modern literature. "This is not an object of sentimental value," he said. "It has grease along the edges consistent with repeated handling, recently." "Then someone's been using it," I said. "Indeed. And the inscription on the tag has been lightly abraded, perhaps to obscure an earlier number. Miss Lockwood, what does your brother do for a living?" "He's an accountant, or was, for the Harrington Investment Group." "Archie," Wolfe said, "look up the Harrington Arms. I trust it is not owned by the same people who fund its namesake investments. Not unless they're in the business of providing hourly rates and pink neon." That earned me the faintest twitch of his upper lip, a Wolfe smile, which is rarer than a polite cabbie. Miss Lockwood gripped her handbag tighter. "Please, I didn't come for humor. I came because someone opened my brother's apartment last night. When I went there, the lock was scratched. They didn't find the key because it was in his mailbox. I think they wanted me to find it." "That," Wolfe said, "is either psychological cruelty or invitation. Both are expensive." She flushed. "I can pay. I have no doubt, but whether you can afford the truth is another matter." I leaned back, pen poised. "You want us to find your brother, or the reason someone doesn't want him found?" "Both." Wolfe set the key down on the blotter like it was contaminated with mediocrity. "Archie, inform Inspector Kramer that a woman has entered this house through an unlocked door and presented us with an ethical inconvenience." "You want him here?" "I want his irritation. It clarifies the atmosphere." Miss Lockwood stood. "If you bring the police in, they'll close it. They'll say he left voluntarily. Please, just look into it first. If you think it's nothing, I'll go to them myself." Wolfe regarded her for a full 10 seconds of silence thick enough to spread on toast. Then, "Sit down. Archie, fetch the directory." I did, flipping pages until the paper began to smell like dust and procedure. Wolfe dictated, "Harrington Arms. Address, telephone." "Got it. Call them. Ask who occupies room 312. I dialed. The clerk sounded like he'd been napping with a cigarette. "Room 312? "No, sir. That room's been vacant 3 days. Last guest checked out sudden, left before paying. Name?" "Lockwood." I hung up, turned to Wolfe. "So far, she's telling the truth." "Truth is a surface," Wolfe murmured. "We have yet to learn what lies beneath." Outside, the sound of a car engine idled, lingered, then faded. I noticed the faint tremor of the brass key on the desk as if from distant vibration. Miss Lockwood's eyes followed it. "I told you," she said softly. "Someone's watching." Wolfe leaned back, steepled fingers rising. "Then, Miss Lockwood, I suggest you remain where you are. Archie, bolt the door. This time ensure it stays locked." I turned the bolt until it bit the frame. One honest click to restore order. Wolfe's eyes were closed, fingers steepled, as though the metal had confessed. Miss Lockwood hadn't moved. Her purse still clutched like a small animal begging to be excused. "Evidence of force?" Wolfe asked without opening his eyes. "None," I said. "Either the lock lost ambition or someone knew its manners." "Then competence, not chaos," he murmured. "That door wasn't opened. It was tested." She looked from one of us to the other. "I told you, I only pushed it." "Yes," Wolfe said, "and someone arranged that you could." I crossed back to my desk. "Meaning we've been announced?" "Indeed." His lids lifted. "Whoever entered this house invited you to follow?" She blinked. "You think they wanted me here?" "I think," he said, "they wanted me aware that you were." The silence thickened until the phone decided it had better contribute. I reached it first. "Nero Wolfe's office." A man's voice. Flat, unhurried. "Tell Wolfe the key stays out of it." "Sure," I said. "He's good at ignoring cases that break into his house." Click. Wolfe's eyebrow twitched. "So soon? Warnings are the courtesy of professionals." "He called me by job title only," I said. "Knows the layout, not the wallpaper." "Recent acquaintance," Wolfe said. "Perhaps corporate." Miss Lockwood pressed a hand to her throat. "They know I'm here." "Evidently," Wolfe said. "You will stay until I permit otherwise. Fritz will arrange food. Archie will arrange sense." I nodded. "First order of business. Your brother's background. Start talking while the line's still warm." "Alan's 35, she began. "An accountant at Harrington Investments. Quiet. Too honest for finance." "An admirable defect," Wolfe said. "When did you last see him?" "Tuesday lunch. He said he was quitting, that he had to fix something first. When I asked what, he said I wouldn't understand." "Names?" "Just one. Bates. He didn't trust him." "Archie," Wolfe said. Locate this Bates. Alive if possible. That'll take legwork. Which is why I have you. I made a note. And the key? The key, Wolfe said, is invitation disguised as clue. Whoever sent it wishes us to visit. Room 312. She straightened. Then he's alive. I make no such leap. Dead men can send messages if clever hands assist them. Her fingers tightened again. You make everything sound like chess. It is, he said. You've moved your piece. Now they answer. The phone rang once more. Short, sharp. I grabbed it. Kramer's sergeant on the line, voice seasoned with gravel. Inspector's out. Want to leave a reason? Tell him Wolfe's brownstone got an uninvited audit. He'll love that. When I hung up, Wolfe was already talking. Our visitor outside? Grey sedan, still nesting 2 doors down. Observation, he said. An unsubtle profession. He rose, a sight still fit for an eclipse. I shall inspect the lock. You don't trust my report? I trust it as far as your ego. He moved to the door, crouched, peered. Tool marks consistent with a skeleton key, not a pick. Precision work. Meaning deliberate. Meaning theatrical. They wished me to notice. He stood, grimacing at his knees. We will oblige them later. For now, the Harrington Arms. You sending me solo? Do you see another candidate? I went for my hat. Miss Lockwood looked alarmed. If they're watching, they'll follow him, Wolfe said, which is desirable. He's expendable. Thanks, I told him. He waved me off. Bring back facts before dinner. Avoid melodrama. Outside, Manhattan's October wind did its usual personality test. The sedan was gone, but a cigarette butt still smoked near the curb. I flagged a cab and gave the driver Harrington Arms, 8th and 53rd. The city blurred by in puddle light. I kept replaying that key, grease on the edges, Wolfe's tone calling it recent. Somebody had used it less than a day ago. The Harrington Arms was a brick box with neon ambition. Inside, the lobby smelled of disinfectant and denial. A clerk looked up from a crossword. Need a room? Information first, I said. Room 312. He frowned. That's sealed. Guest checked out sudden. Name of the guest? Lockwood, left owing 2 nights. That aligned too neatly to be coincidence. Police been by? He hesitated. 2 men. Suits. No badges shown. You keep a register? Sure, but they took the page. I slid a bill across the counter. Maybe you keep carbon copies? He weighed greed against fear, then ducked beneath the desk. A moment later, he handed me a torn sheet. Only one entry visible. A. Lockwood, R.R., Oct 12, Dep Oct. The date smeared. Thanks, I said. He added, one of those men left an envelope. Said someone would ask. He pulled it from a drawer, plain, unsealed, addressed for the man who asks too many questions. Flattering, I said. Inside was another brass key, identical tag, Harrington Arms 314. Twin clues, side by side now in my pocket, and neither smiling. I stepped into the hallway leading toward the elevators. Wallpaper, the color of weak tea, a maid's cart parked halfway down. No sound except the buzz of a dying bulb. I took the stairs. Wolfe's lectures on cardiovascular health occasionally haunt me. 3rd floor, numbers marching in brass. 312, taped crosswise with police seal. 3 foot, plain, waiting. I checked the corridor both ways, listened. Nothing but plumbing sighs. The key slid in smooth, eager. The door opened onto a room that smelled of old coffee and new fear. Bed unmade, window cracked, suitcase open on the chair. On the dresser lay a folded newspaper dated yesterday and a ledger with pages torn out. The remaining page showed 3 handwritten lines. Harrington Invest. Bates. Pinnacle Trust, and beneath it, a smudge shaped suspiciously like a fingerprint. I took photos with the pocket camera, then backed out slow. If the cops, or whoever pretended to be, had already been here, I was now rewriting their crime scene. The elevator dinged below. Footsteps echoed up the stairwell, deliberate, unhurried. I reached the corner in time to see a man step onto the landing. Grey suit, hat low, expression mild as arsenic. He looked at me, smiled. "Evening," he said. "Depends who's asking." He nodded toward my pocket. "You found our envelope." "Yours?" "Call it a courtesy. Mr. Wolfe should stay home. You should stop using taxis." He started past me. The scent of cheap cologne and warm metal followed. By the time I thought of blocking him, he'd gone down the next flight. I waited until the sound faded, then looked back at room 314. The key still hung from the lock, catching the hallway light. I pocketed it, stepped into the stairwell, and told myself this was still just a missing person case. But Wolfe's rule about symmetry whispered in my head, when one door opens without permission, another usually waits unlocked. I took the next flight of stairs, 2 at a time, the echo of his shoes fading like a grin swallowed by distance. When I reached the lobby, the street door was already sighing shut, and outside the sidewalk had dissolved into ordinary city motion. No grey suit, no cologne, no clue except the draft he'd left behind. I stood there a second, weighing whether to chase him, and decided against it. Wolfe hated exercise unless it was mental, and I was still his representative species. I stepped into the nearest phone booth, dug out a dime, and called the brownstone. Wolfe answered on the second ring, which told me Fritz had fetched the phone to him rather than the other way around. "Well?" he demanded. "I've just met one of our audience," I said. Grey suit, polite voice. Probably the same one who phoned. Left me a key to the room next to Lockwood's. "Which you used?" "I did. The decor's bloodless. One ledger, some handwriting linking Harrington Investments to a place called Pinnacle Trust, and the ghost of a fingerprint." "Whose?" "I'd have to borrow Kramer's microscope for that." "Then bring it here, immediately." "Sure," I said. "I'll just tuck the hotel under my arm." "Archie." His tone lowered a notch. "Someone followed you. I noticed. Then returned by a different route. I wish to test whether you collect company." That was Wolfe's version of "don't get killed." I hung up, left the booth, and took a cab to Midtown by way of nowhere. At a red light, I watched the mirrors. Nothing trailed us but rain. When I got back, Fritz was in the hallway, drying his hands on a towel. "He's in a mood," he said. "He's in a profession," I told him, and went in. Wolfe was planted behind his desk, glowering at the brass key like it had failed to bloom. Miss Lockwood sat nearby with tea she wasn't drinking. "You've brought it?" he asked. I dropped the ledger and the second key onto the blotter. "Room 314. Our friend moved next door." He examined the keys side by side. "Identical manufacture, identical tags, but this one has new filing marks along the grooves. Meaning a copy. Meaning intent." He tapped them together, producing a small metallic complaint. "And this ledger?" I opened it for him. Half the pages torn out. What's left shows a trail from Harrington Investments to Pinnacle Trust. "Your turn." He peered, grunted. Pinnacle Trust. A shell used in several recent embezzlement cases. If Mr. Lockwood discovered his employer's finances to be creative, it could account for his disappearance. Miss Lockwood leaned forward. "Then he's in danger." "He was in danger the moment he decided to have integrity," Wolfe said. "Archie, telephone Kramer again. Inform him that a man named Bates, employed by Harrington Investments, may be laundering funds through Pinnacle Trust. Want to bet he'll laugh?" I am indifferent to his mirth. I called, left the message, and turned back. "You figure Bates is the one tailing us?" "Possibly. But more likely, Mr. Bates retains someone whose discretion is for hire." She set the cup down carefully. "Can't you go to the police now?" "I could," Wolfe said, But if we involve them prematurely, your brother becomes a case file instead of a human being. Patience buys leverage. She stared at the ledger like she could read her brother out of it. He must have found proof. Perhaps, Wolfe said. But proof unshared is possession, and possession invites confiscation. The phone rang again. Fritz appeared, looking uneasy. "Inspector Kramer," he said. "Ah," Wolfe murmured. "Our friend responds faster when provoked." He took the receiver. "Good evening, Inspector. I'm calling in your professional curiosity." From my end, I heard Kramer's growl. "You already did, Wolfe. One of my men found your name scribbled in a hotel log we pulled from a sealed room. You want to explain that?" "Not yet," Wolfe said. "I will, however, tell you that the man missing from that room, Alan Lockwood, stumbled upon a financial fraud. I now hold a piece of it." "Where?" "In my office, safe from your chain of custody." "Damn it, Wolfe." "Inspector," he said evenly, "if you want results, bring your appetite and come. If you want to shout, shout elsewhere." He hung up, satisfied. He will arrive. He never resists insult. Miss Lockwood looked from him to me. "Will he help?" "Help is a relative term," I said. "He'll storm in, threaten to arrest Wolfe, then use our information and forget gratitude exists." She almost smiled. "Then you've worked together before." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Archie, examine the ledger under the desk lamp. What paper stock?" I flipped it open. Thick, watermark faint but legible. British manufacture. Not something an accountant buys for fun. "Good," he said. "Our trail crosses the Atlantic. Such scale requires consortium. The Harrington Group is not acting alone." Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. This time, the honest kind. Fritz appeared again. "Inspector Kramer," he said dryly. Kramer came in like a man allergic to civility. "All right, Wolfe. What's the joke this time?" "No joke," Wolfe said. "Merely arithmetic." He gestured toward the keys and ledger. "These concern a man who may already be dead. I suggest you treat them as friends." Kramer snorted, but his eyes did the inventory. "You get this from that sister?" She brought the first key. The second was delivered by an emissary who prefers veiled threats to conversation. Kramer flipped the ledger open, scanned the scribble. "Pinnacle Trust, I've heard that name. Crooked loans, phantom clients." "Precisely," Wolfe said. "You might consider tracing their New York representatives. I suspect Mr. Bates will emerge before the ink dries." "Fine," Kramer said. "Meanwhile, you stay out of it." "I shall consider that advice," Wolfe said, which in his language means no. When Kramer left, slamming the door like punctuation, Wolfe turned to me. "Archie, you will accompany Miss Lockwood to her brother's apartment. The door has already been violated. There may yet be residue of motive." "Residue meaning fingerprints or corpses?" "Preferably neither. Take care." She rose, grateful and frightened. "You're sure that's safe?" "No," I said. "But it's next." The rain had stopped, leaving the city polished and sullen. Her building was 10 blocks east, a narrow brown structure with windows that blinked from passing cars. She unlocked the door, this one obedient, and we entered a small apartment that smelled of dust and paperwork. Nothing looked ransacked, which is sometimes worse. The desk drawer held bills, receipts, and a single envelope marked, "To Marion." She opened it, hands shaking. Inside was a single typed line. "Trust no. One from Harrington. Especially Bates." She looked up. He knew they'd come. Maybe he wrote that for insurance. Her eyes filled, then hardened. "He never lied to me. If he's dead, I'll find out who did it." I pocketed the note carefully. "You just hired the right man for that line of work." From the hallway came the sound of movement. Soft, careful, too measured for a neighbor. I stepped toward the door, motioned her back. and opened it fast. The corridor was empty except for the smell of cheap cologne. That made two of us breathing too quietly. I moved fast enough to catch the last breath of cologne before it disappeared down the stairwell. The hall lights flickered as if the building itself didn't like being a witness. I drew the door closed behind me and listened. Silence, thick and breathing. Whoever had been watching was gone, but the quiet felt practiced. Miss Lockwood was standing near the table, the note still trembling in her hand. Was someone out there? Yes, I said, keeping my tone even. They wanted to know if we'd read their message. We have. She folded the paper, a small defiance. Then what now? Now we make them nervous. I took another slow look around the apartment, careful not to touch what Wolfe would want unsmudged. An empty ashtray with one dark fleck of tobacco, faint indentations on the carpet near the desk where a second chair had stood recently, and a phone cord stretched too straight for chance. He wasn't taken from here, I said. He left, or was made to leave, without a fight. Her voice was a whisper. That means he's alive. Maybe, but the people keeping him that way aren't doing it for kindness. The window over the sink rattled in a weak gust. I turned the catch, found it half-latched, and looked down into the narrow alley below. A thin man in a felt hat stood in the orange light of a street lamp, pretending to smoke and forgetting the cigarette. When I leaned a little farther, he tilted his head and walked away fast. "Miss Lockwood," I said, "we're leaving. Now." She grabbed her coat without argument. We took the stairs quietly and reached the sidewalk just as a cab rolled by. I waved it down and pushed her inside. "West 35th, I told the driver, "and keep the meter honest." Through the rear window, the street lamp slid past like a slow-motion tail. I could feel her watching me instead of the city. "You think they'll come after us?" "They already have. The trick is not letting them know how much ground they've gained." When we reached the brownstone, Fritz had the door open before my key hit the lock. "Mr. Wolfe is in the office," he said. "He's been walking." "That's how you know he's worried," I told her. Wolfe turned from the Globe bar as we entered, the weight of impatience thick in the air. "Your expression is eloquent," he said. "Report." I gave him the short version, the note, the watcher, the quiet apartment. He listened with eyes half closed, a bear in meditation. "The note," he said at last. "May I?" She handed it to him. He read the single line twice, then held it to the lamp. Machine typed on office stock, ribbon of average wear. The spacing irregular on the capital letters suggests an Underwood Standard, Model E. "That narrows it to a few 100,000, I said. "It narrows it to those within the Harrington building who own outdated equipment," he corrected. "Progress often exposes guilt." He set the note aside and turned to her. "Miss Lockwood, your brother's signature habits. Did he smoke?" "No, he hated the smell." "Then the ashtray in his room is someone else's. Possibly the visitor who persuaded him to go." Her face paled. "Persuaded how?" "With argument or weapon. We will determine which. Archie, fetch Saul Panzer." I raised a brow. "You're bringing in the cavalry already." "Caution," he said. "Not cavalry. I wish Mr. Panzer to locate Mr. Bates discreetly and report by midnight." I called Saul, gave him the details, and returned to find Wolfe staring at the two keys again. "Symmetry," he murmured. "2 doors, adjacent rooms. One genuine, one imitation. Whoever forged the second key did so to control entry, not to steal, to confine. You think Alan was held there?" "Possibly. The absence of struggle, the staged ledger, the cologne. It suggests demonstration rather than concealment." I turned to Miss Lockwood. "You said he was trying to fix something. Maybe he found out Bates was cooking the books and threatened to talk. They lock him up next door until they decide what to do." Her eyes flashed. "Then he might still be there. Somewhere." "Unlikely," Wolfe said. The rooms are now props and the actors have moved on, but they've left us their script. He looked at me. You will revisit the Harrington Arms tomorrow morning with Mr. Kramer. Allow him to bluster, but see that he retrieves the register for the adjoining rooms. The handwriting will tell us who played which part. You're sure he'll agree? He will object, Wolfe said calmly, and then he will comply. He prefers indignation to failure. She drew a shaky breath. And me? What should I do? You will remain here. Fritz will prepare a room. Your presence outside would invite attention. Your absence inside will confound it. That sounded final. She nodded, exhausted enough not to argue. When she'd gone upstairs, I looked at Wolfe. You think Bates is running the show. He is at least conducting the orchestra, but someone else wrote the music. The telephone interrupted, sharp and timely. I answered, and then Saul's voice came low and dry. Got him. Bates left his office an hour ago, met a man near 48th and Lexington, went into the Belmont Club, still there. I covered the mouthpiece. Bates is socializing at the Belmont. Wolfe frowned. Unwise, but useful. Tell Mr. Panzer to observe and withdraw when the meeting concludes. I prefer Mr. Bates unalerted. I relayed the message. When I hung up, Wolfe was still staring at the dark window beyond the orchids. Archie, that cologne you mentioned. Describe it. Sweet, a little metallic. The kind you smell in elevators after bankers leave them. He nodded slowly. Then our gray-suited friend is no mere hireling. That scent costs more than loyalty. Great, I said. So the opposition smells expensive. How does that help? It means, Wolfe said, that whoever financed this affair believes in appearances. Such men are easier to trap than to convince. The clock on the mantel ticked once like punctuation. He looked at me again. Have you eaten? Not since the apartment. Then dine, he said. You reason better with blood in your head. I shall require you alert when Mr. Panzer calls again. I left him to his orchids and theories. In the kitchen, Fritz ladled soup with the solemnity of a priest. You think it is dangerous? He asked. Only if you spell it out loud, I said. Yes. By the time I returned to the office, Wolfe had settled into his chair, eyes closed, breathing as steady as thought. I sat opposite and waited. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. Saul's voice came crisp. Bates just left the club with another man, grey suit, same build you described. They're heading east on foot. Follow them, I said, but stay invisible. I always do. The line went dead, and the room felt smaller. Wolfe opened his eyes. Archie, he said quietly. If Mr. Bates is walking with our messenger, then the circle is closing. The next step is not pursuit but anticipation. Meaning. Meaning they will come to us again, as they did before. But this time, the door will not be unlocked. The sound came first, a quiet scrape, metal against metal, then the soft click of the gate downstairs closing. Wolfe's eyes opened before the echo faded. Archie, he said, barely above a whisper, we are about to receive visitors. I moved to the hall, hand near the knob but not on it. Fritz was halfway out of the kitchen, towel still in hand, and I gave him a look that sent him back in without a word. Through the frosted glass panel of the front door, two silhouettes stood, one tall and deliberate, the other shorter, solid. The taller one raised a hand and rang once. I opened the door before the second ring. Bates stood there, grey suit sharp enough to pass inspection, and next to him was the man with the cologne, the polite voice from the phone. The street behind them was empty, their car idling half a block down. Evening, I said. If this is a sales call, you're wasting your pitch on the wrong brand of stubborn. Bates smiled without warmth. We need to see Mr. Wolfe. Then you'll have to prove you're worth his eyesight. Behind me, Wolfe's voice floated out, calm as a gavel. Show them in, Archie. We shall indulge their necessity. They followed me into the office like men used to owning rooms. Wolfe didn't rise, but he did incline his head an inch, which for him counts as rolling out a red carpet. "Mr. Bates," he said, "and your associate." The second man produced a smile polished to professional blandness. "Call me Collins." "I prefer accuracy to civility," Wolfe replied. "But for the moment, Collins will do." They sat without waiting for permission. Bates set a folded handkerchief on his knee, insurance against nervous sweat, and said, "We understand you've been making inquiries about a Mr. Alan Lockwood." "Your understanding is correct," Wolfe said. "I dislike mysteries that enter my home uninvited. Mr. Lockwood accomplished that through his sister." Bates' eyes narrowed. "You have something of his." "A ledger and a key," Wolfe said, "both of which are more talkative than you appear to be." Collins leaned forward. "Those items were obtained illegally from property under corporate investigation. We're here to retrieve them quietly." "Indeed," Wolfe said, unimpressed. "And who appointed you custodian of the law?" Collins' smile thinned. "Let's say we're acting in the firm's interest." "Ah," Wolfe said. "Then you confirm corporate anxiety." "Excellent." Bates exhaled. "Look, Mr. Wolfe, you don't know what you're meddling in. Lockwood made a mistake. He took company materials and disappeared. We're trying to keep it internal before the papers catch wind." "Your concern for reputation is touching," Wolfe said. "Yet I suspect the missing man's welfare ranks somewhat lower." Bates' jaw flexed. "We're not here to debate morals." "Then I fail to see why you are here at all," Wolfe said. "You wish to retrieve objects which I lawfully hold. I decline. You may inform your employers that Nero Wolfe does not barter in intimidation." Collins's hand drifted to his coat pocket, too smoothly. I took one step forward, voice even. "If you're reaching for a wallet, I'll assume you keep your cash in brass cartridges." He froze, hand halfway. "Easy," he said. "Always," I replied. "Now take it out slow." It was a card. Black, no logo, just a name and a phone number. He placed it on Wolfe's desk like a threat disguised as stationery. "You call that number," he said, "when you've decided reason beats pride." "I seldom use telephones for theology," Wolfe said. "You may keep your number." "Archie." I took the card, tore it neatly down the middle, and dropped the halves in the wastebasket. Collins didn't flinch, but the line at the corner of his mouth deepened. "Let's go," he told Bates. As they rose, Wolfe's tone turned conversational. "Mr. Bates, before you leave, how is Pinnacle Trust?" Bates stopped. "What do you mean?" "The name appears often in Mr. Lockwood's ledger," Wolfe said. "I assume it's still functioning, though perhaps not for long." Color crept up Bates' neck. "You don't know anything about it." "On the contrary," Wolfe said. "I know it will soon collapse, because all frauds do when confronted by intellect. Good night." Bates hesitated, then walked out. Collins followed, slower, his cologne trailing like an afterthought. When the door shut, Wolfe let out a low, satisfied grunt. "Archie," he said, "kindly call Inspector Kramer. Inform him that 2 guests have just committed verbal trespass." I dialed, relayed the essentials, and hung up. "Kramer says he's on his way, probably to scold us for not getting shot." "Commendable consistency," Wolfe said. He leaned back, eyes closing briefly. This confrontation was instructive. Bates displayed fear. Collins displayed calculation. The former serves the latter, but neither commands. "Then who does?" "That," Wolfe said, "is the question worth staying awake for." From upstairs came the faint creak of a floorboard, Miss Lockwood pacing. I went halfway up and met her at the landing. "It's fine," I said. "They came, they talked, they left frowning." Her relief was short-lived. "They know you won't stop. Then they're learning fast." She looked past me toward Wolfe's office. He won't quit until he finds Alan, will he? No, I said. He's allergic to unfinished business. A knock sounded again, heavier this time. Kramer didn't wait for me to reach the door. He barged in wearing a wet trench and his usual disposition. "Wolfe," he barked, "you playing gatekeeper for criminals now?" "Good evening, Inspector," Wolfe said. "You're late. Your quarry has departed." Kramer's glare shifted to me. "You should have called sooner." "I did," I said. "You drive, not teleport." He grunted, pulled a notebook from his coat. "Describe them." I did. Wolfe added details like height, cologne, and vocabulary, because he never forgets anything that offends him. Kramer pocketed the notes. "All right. If these two are who I think, they're tied to more than bookkeeping. A federal outfit's been sniffing around Pinnacle Trust for months." "That confirms our deduction," Wolfe said. "Mr. Lockwood uncovered evidence worth killing for." Kramer sighed. "And you've just painted a target on yourself." Wolfe lifted his brows. "Then perhaps you'll be good enough to stand in front of it." Kramer growled something about ulcers and turned toward the door. "If you get another visit, don't wait to call." "Inspector," Wolfe said, "I never wait. I observe." When he left, the office fell quiet except for the slow crackle from the fireplace. Wolfe turned to me. "They will return, Archie. Differently, prepared. Until then, ensure the locks are functional, including yours." I nodded. "You expecting night visitors?" "I'm expecting human nature. It dislikes insult." He leaned back, folded his hands over his stomach, and closed his eyes again. The rhythm of his breathing matched the tick of the clock, steady, deliberate, waiting for the next move to reveal itself. The minute the front door latched behind Kramer, Wolfe opened his eyes again. "Archie," he said, "bolt it." I turned the deadbolt until it clicked, same as before, but this time the sound had a different weight. Wolfe didn't move. He sat there like a man calculating the number of steps left before the floor gave way. "They will not return tonight," he said finally. "They've delivered their warning and gauged my response. The next approach will be subtler." "Good," I said. "I'm tired of the unsubtle kind." "Then keep the fatigue brief. We have work." He pointed to the phone. "Saul must be apprised of our visitors. His discretion is the only shield against surprise." I called Saul, gave him the description of Bates and Collins, and told him to keep watching the Belmont Club for any sign of either. He whistled low. "That's bigger fish than usual," he said. "That's why Wolfe's hungry," I told him. "Stay invisible." When I hung up, Wolfe had leaned back, eyes half closed again. "Archie, bring Miss Lockwood down." I went upstairs and found her in the guest room, standing by the window with her arms folded tight. She turned at my knock. "More questions?" "Always. You're starring in the midnight conference." She followed me down, silent but steady. Wolfe gestured to the chair across from his desk, as if it were an official witness stand. "Miss Lockwood," he said, "your brother's professional history. Was he ever dismissed or threatened with dismissal?" "No," she said. "He was valued. At least that's what they told him." "They told him many things," Wolfe said. "Did he speak of any disagreement with his superiors?" She hesitated. "Only once. 2 months ago he said numbers in one of the subsidiary ledgers didn't balance, but his supervisor, Mr. Bates, told him to adjust them quietly." Alan refused. Wolfe's eyes opened. "And Bates remains employed?" She nodded. "Then corruption is institutional. The missing pages from the ledger will reveal the path of the theft. Archie, fetch the copy we took." I slid it from the cabinet, placed it on his blotter. Wolfe opened to the surviving entries, traced one thick finger along a column. "See here, deposits through a brokerage called Marbury Associates. Now defunct. Funds diverted to Pinnacle Trust. It is a chain of shadows, and someone feared that Lockwood could illuminate it." She looked stricken. Then they killed him. Do not assume, Wolfe said. If he were dead, his enemies would be silent. Instead, they make noise, which suggests containment, not closure. That's comfort, I asked. It is probability. The phone rang again, cutting through the air like a verdict. I grabbed it. Saul's voice came taut and low. They're moving. Bates just left the club with the same grey car. Collins driving. They picked up a third man outside a warehouse on 43rd. Couldn't get a look at his face. Heading downtown. Keep on them, but not close, I said. You smell cologne, you're too near. Understood. I relayed the report. Wolfe nodded once. Their purpose is retrieval. Either they seek the remainder of the ledger or to silence its substitute owner. He turned to her. Miss Lockwood, is there anyone else your brother confided in? No. He kept everything to himself, except... She bit her lip. There was a friend at the firm, Elsa Granger. She worked in accounts. I think he trusted her. Where does Miss Granger live? On West End Avenue. I could get the address from his notebook. It's upstairs. Wolfe looked at me. Accompany her. Obtain the address and call from there. If this woman still breathes, she may hold the missing pages. Sure, I said. And if Bates gets there first? Then exercise your judgment, not your heroism. That was Wolfe's way of saying try not to get shot. I helped Miss Lockwood into her coat, and we went out into the night that smelled of wet stone and restless taxis. The city looked as if it had been polished by suspicion. Her brother's notebook lay on the small writing desk beside the window. The address was neat, penciled in Alan's careful hand. I called Wolfe, repeated it. Good, he said. Proceed, but with awareness. The adversary anticipates your movement. He hung up. I pocketed the note and hailed another cab. She sat beside me, silent except for the small rhythm of her breath. The ride took 10 minutes. Every light seemed willing to turn green just long enough for worry to keep pace. The building at the address was quiet, lights sparse. I pressed the buzzer marked E. Granger. No answer. I pressed again. Somewhere above, a window creaked. A woman's voice called down, "Who is it?" "Friend of Alan Lockwood," I said. A pause. Then, "Come up, 3rd floor." The lock buzzed and we entered. The stairway smelled of varnish and onions. At the top, Elsa Granger waited in a robe and slippers, her hair pinned with the desperation of someone who hadn't slept in nights. "Alan's sister," she said softly, seeing Marian. "You shouldn't be here." "Why?" Marian asked. "Because they are watching," she whispered. "They came yesterday. 2 men. They asked for the ledger." I felt my shoulders tighten. "Describe them." "One had a square jaw and too much cologne. The other was quieter." That nailed it. "They warned me not to talk to anyone. Then they searched the place." She pointed to the desk. I had already hidden what they wanted. From a drawer, she produced a folded packet of papers, edges browned. These were Alan's. He said if anything happened, to give them to his sister. Marian's hand trembled as she took them. "Then he's alive." Elsa shook her head. "I don't know. They said he'd run away, but one of them had blood on his cuff." That froze the room. Outside, a car engine idled. I moved to the window and looked down. Same grey sedan. Its headlights were off, but exhaust steamed pale in the streetlight. "They found us," I said. "Back door?" She pointed to a narrow service stair. We moved quickly, Marian first, Elsa behind her, me last. The wooden steps creaked like old bones, but we made it to the alley. The sedan's engine revved. Doors opened. "Run," I told them, and shoved the packet inside my coat. The alley spilled into a cross street with a cab stand 2 blocks down. I flagged the first one, hustled them in, and gave the driver the brownstone address. Through the rear glass, I saw the sedan hesitate at the corner, then slide into traffic the other way. Either they hadn't seen us, or they decided to follow from farther back. When we reached home, Fritz's face appeared in the doorway, pale as his apron. Wolfe was still in the office, but he was standing, which was worse. "You bring guests," he said dryly. "Souvenirs, too." I handed him the packet. He unfolded it with surgeon care, eyes moving over the handwriting. The faintest nod. "Authentic," he said. "Mr. Lockwood had courage and method." Marian's voice broke. "Then he's dead, isn't he?" Wolfe looked up. "He may yet surprise us. But his enemies are alive. That is enough work for tonight." He turned to me. "Archie, call Kramer. Inform him that the case he wished to avoid now includes attempted murder and grand larceny. He will be here within the hour." "Want me to brew coffee?" "No," he said. "Brandy. It will be a long hour." Wolfe's definition of a long hour was usually measured in the lifespan of a glass of beer, but this one stretched taut as piano wire. He stood at the desk, the packet of Lockwood's papers spread open like evidence on trial. Marian sat stiffly in the red chair, her hands locked together in her lap, while Elsa Granger perched on the edge of the sofa, trembling and watching Wolfe as if he were a judge whose verdict might determine whether she continued breathing. He moved one sheet closer to the lamp, his finger tracing each neat line of ink. "Archie," he said, "observe this. The entries under Marbury Associates end 3 days before Lockwood's disappearance. On that date, transfers begin under an unlisted name, C. March & Co. That is the first point of fracture." "Fracture meaning stolen money?" I asked. "Fracture meaning someone inserted an intermediary account to disguise theft." He set the page aside. "Miss Granger, you prepared any of these ledgers?" She nodded nervously. "Some, yes, but not those entries. Mr. Bates handled the Marbury sheets himself. He said the workload was too technical." "Technical," Wolfe repeated with contempt, a convenient euphemism for falsified. Marian's voice came thin and dry. "Then Allen found this, didn't he? And they punished him for it." "It seems he found more than one expects from an accountant," Wolfe said. "These figures were not casual errors. They were deliberate misdirection, and he must have traced their path to the upper echelon of the firm." I leaned over his shoulder. "You're saying Bates and Collins aren't freelancing?" "Hardly," Wolfe said. "They are instruments. The true beneficiary remains unseen." The front bell rang before I could answer, sharp and impatient. Wolfe didn't glance up. "Kramer," he said. "Let him in, but remind him his voice is not a foghorn." I opened the door. The inspector's face carried its usual healthy red irritation, and he didn't waste time on greetings. "All right, Goodwin, where's the fireworks this time?" "In the office," I said, "and keep the gunpowder dry." He came in, hat still dripping rain, and gave the room a quick scan that landed on the 2 women. "You multiply witnesses like rabbits, Wolfe. What's the charge now?" "Grand larceny, conspiracy, and possibly murder," Wolfe said without turning. "Sit down." Kramer scowled but obeyed. "You have proof?" "Proof enough to annoy you." Wolfe handed him the top page. "Read." Kramer's eyes flicked across the columns. "Shell transfers. Off-book deposits. Yeah, I've seen this pattern before. But you can't tell who signed it." "The initials on the bottom right," Wolfe said. "They are not Lockwood's, though the forger attempted imitation. Compare the slant." The forgery leans forward. Kramer grunted. "So Bates cooked the books?" "Under supervision," Wolfe said. "And when Lockwood objected, he was either confined or silenced. Miss Granger here confirms the timing of the falsifications and the men who questioned her afterward." Kramer studied her. "2 of them, one with too much cologne." Her nod was almost a shiver. "Yeah, we've had reports on those boys. Private security for hire. Ex-corporate. One of them's named Collins, real name Walter Cole. The other I don't know. If they're working under contract, they're covering for somebody high up." "Which supports my conclusion," Wolfe said. Inspector, you will issue warrants for Mr. Bates and Mr. Cole. But first, you will keep this quiet. The perpetrators must believe we are still groping." Kramer's brows met. "You're giving me orders again." "I'm giving you results," Wolfe said. "If you blunder in publicly, the guilty will evaporate. Allow them to act again. They cannot resist the impulse to retrieve what condemns them." Kramer folded his arms. "And you'll just sit here and wait for them to walk into your trap?" "Precisely," Wolfe said. He looked at me. "You're both nuts." I shrugged. "We're consistent nuts." He jammed his hat back on and muttered something about needing aspirin before leaving. The door thudded shut, and the air felt clearer for the noise he took with him. Elsa stood. "I should go. If they find I came here—" "They already suspect it," Wolfe said. "Leaving will confirm. You'll stay." "I can't. You can," he said. And that settled it. Marion touched her arm gently. "He's right. They won't stop if they think you're a witness." She sank back down, defeated. Wolfe leaned forward, tapping the papers with a thick finger. "This ledger must remain here. Archie, lock it in the safe. If they force entry, they will take only decoys." I did as told. When the door clanged shut on the safe, Wolfe rose. "Now we wait." "Meaning we do nothing." "Doing nothing is an art, Archie. Few perform it well." The office light turned softer under the weight of silence. Outside, a car passed slowly, too slowly. I crossed to the window and looked through the curtain slit. The gray sedan was back, idling at the curb, exhaust blooming against the dark. "They're watching again," I said. "Good," Wolfe replied. "Their impatience will soon betray them." It didn't take long. A faint metallic tick echoed from the hall, door handle moving. I was halfway to the entrance when it swung inward an inch and froze. Wolfe's voice cut the air, low and commanding. "Archie, no noise. Let them come." The door eased wider. A silhouette filled it, then two. The first one stepped into the spill of lamplight. Collins, gun in hand, his cologne cutting through the orchid scent like a challenge. "Stay seated," he said quietly. "We'll take the papers and be gone." "Futile," Wolfe said. "They are beyond your reach." Bates appeared behind him, pale and sweating. "Just give them to us," he said. "You don't understand what's at stake." "I understand perfectly," Wolfe said. "The sum of your crimes, for instance." Bates' gun hand trembled. "I didn't kill him. I swear I didn't." Marion gasped. "You did see my brother." He turned to her, eyes wet. "He found out everything, who was behind it, where the money went. Cole was supposed to scare him off, that's all." "Be quiet," Collins hissed. But Wolfe was already speaking, voice measured and heavy. "Cole killed him then. You've confirmed it." Cole's gun shifted toward Wolfe. "You'll never prove it." "Proof," Wolfe said, "is overrated. Confession suffices." That was my cue. I kicked the small end table beside the couch. The crash startled them just long enough for me to lunge. The gun went off, deafening in the close air, but the shot tore into the ceiling. I caught Cole's wrist and twisted. He howled, dropped the weapon. Bates stumbled backward into the desk, scattering papers. Fritz burst from the kitchen with a heavy tray. He swung it with surprising accuracy, and it connected with Bates's shoulder like punctuation. The man folded. When the room stopped spinning, Wolfe was still seated, unruffled. "Archie, the police." I nodded, called Kramer's direct line. "You wanted fireworks," I told him. "Come collect what's left." He arrived in minutes, officers behind him, faces grim and eager. Cole and Bates were handcuffed without ceremony. Wolfe merely inclined his head. "Inspector," he said, "you now have your evidence, your witnesses, and your culprits. I suggest efficiency." Kramer exhaled through his teeth. "One of these days you're going to run out of miracles." Wolfe smiled faintly. Nonsense. Miracles are merely logic before it's explained. As they were led out, Marion turned toward him. Then Alan really is... Yes, Wolfe said softly. But his integrity survives him, which is more than can be said for most of his profession. She nodded, tears silent. When the door closed behind the last uniform, Wolfe leaned back, eyes shutting as though the case itself had been a heavy meal. Archie, he murmured, lock the door. This time, keep it that way. I turned the bolt until it bit, the sound sharp as punctuation. Wolfe sat still, eyes closed, breathing through his nose like a man savoring both victory and indigestion. The air smelled of cordite, orchids, and Fritz's brandy, an odd perfume for survival. Miss Lockwood was near the mantel, white as the marble she leaned against, and Elsa Granger sat folded into herself, staring at the floor as if it still held the echo of gunfire. Sit down, Wolfe said finally, voice even again. The noise is finished, but the meaning remains. I crossed to the window, checked the street. The grey sedan was gone, hauled away in police custody. Meaning we've got 2 men cooling their heels in Kramer's custody, I said, and a dead accountant who didn't die for nothing. Wolfe opened his eyes. On the contrary, he died precisely for something, knowledge. But knowledge unspoken has no power. Ours now is to complete his statement. I poured 3 fingers of brandy, passed one to Miss Lockwood. Her hand shook, but she took it. If Alan's dead, she said softly, then I want every one of them to face what he found. They will, Wolfe said. But if you wish the truth, prepare for discomfort. It rarely flatters the innocent. I sat across from him. Kramer's men are hauling coal and Bates downtown. If either cracks, we'll have a confession by sunrise. Wolfe's brows lifted. I prefer intellect to interrogation. Physical discomfort inspires lies. Logic compels truth. He turned to Elsa Granger. You, Miss Granger, when you handled those ledgers, who received your completed sheets? Always Bates, she said. He collected them at the end of the week. Sometimes a courier from another office signed for them, someone I didn't know. Describe him. Tall, narrow face, wire-rim glasses. He said he worked for the partners. Name? March, I think. He signed the receipts. C. March. I looked at Wolfe. That's the same name from the new entries. C. March & Co. The ghost company. Exactly, Wolfe said. The pseudonym was never symbolic. It was a signature. Miss Lockwood leaned forward. Then this March was the one behind it. Possibly. Or his name was borrowed by someone who valued anonymity. Wolfe pressed the bell for Fritz, who appeared with professional composure. Coffee, Wolfe said, for 4. When he left, Wolfe continued. Archie, call Lon Cohen at the Gazette. Inquire discreetly whether any article has appeared on a C. March connected to the Harrington Group or Pinnacle Trust. He owes me 2 favors and 1 silence. I dialed. Lon answered on the first ring, voice dry as sandpaper. Goodwin, tell me you're not phoning for restaurant tips. Not tonight. Ever hear of C. March & Co.? He whistled low. Yeah. Small brokerage under investigation for laundering through offshore accounts. Federal boys are sniffing. Connected to Harrington. Same umbrella. Word is they've been moving money to a Swiss outfit called Alpex Holdings. Why? Because Wolfe's eyebrows just twitched, I said. Lon chuckled. Then it's worth ink. Keep me posted. I hung up. Wolfe's eyes had narrowed to points of amber calculation. Alpex Holdings, he repeated. A shell used by an American financier named Charles March. He sits on Harrington's board. So he named the fake company after himself, I said. That's confidence. Arrogance, Wolfe corrected, and stupidity. A man who leaves his monogram on a crime invites justice as surely as a signature invites debt. The doorbell rang again. Fast, insistent. I moved toward it, but Wolfe stopped me with a raised hand. "One moment." He reached into the drawer, withdrew a small automatic pistol I'd seen maybe 3 times in my life. "Open it," he said quietly. I did. Kramer filled the doorway, hat in hand, coat wet again. His expression was heavier than usual. "You might want to sit down," he said. "Your phrasing suggests something irreversible," Wolfe said. Kramer stepped inside, lowered his voice. "Cole's dead." That made Miss Lockwood flinch, and even Wolfe's nostrils widened a fraction. "Explain." "Poison," Kramer said. "Cyanide capsule. He bit it on the way downtown. Bates is alive but screaming. Says he didn't know. Says he can give us March." "Then perhaps he will live long enough to try," Wolfe said. Kramer wiped his brow. "We found a note on Cole. Typed. Said, 'Close the account. No signature.'" Wolfe tapped a finger on the armrest. "The metaphor's financial. Someone instructed him to end the liability. Himself." "Then we've still got March," I said. "If Bates talks." Kramer gave me a look. "If he doesn't choke on fear first. I've got men bringing in records from Harrington, but it's a paper jungle." "Then prune carefully," Wolfe said. "When you identify March, arrest him discreetly. His panic will confirm his guilt faster than his speech." Kramer stuffed his hat under his arm. "You think you'll still be alive when this hits the papers, Wolfe?" Wolfe smiled faintly. "Inspector, my constitution resists inconvenience. Good night." After the door closed, I turned to him. "So Cole's dead, Bates is half broken, and March is sitting somewhere thinking he's untouchable." "Precisely," Wolfe said, "which means he will act again. Tonight." He looked at the clock. "It is approaching 2. He will have learned by now that Cole failed and Bates was arrested. His only recourse will be elimination of the evidence he cannot reach, us." I glanced at the door. "You want me to sit with a gun pointed at it?" "No," he said. "Sit near the telephone. When it rings, answer it once." It rang before he finished the sentence. I snatched it up. A man's voice, smooth and low, spoke without pause. "Mr. Wolfe, this is Charles March. You've involved yourself in matters far beyond your depth. Return the papers, and no one else will be harmed." "Hold it," I said. "He's on the line." Wolfe extended a hand. I passed him the receiver. "Mr. March," he said, his tone almost lazy, "I congratulate you on your candor. You've saved me the tedium of pursuit." "You have no idea what you're tampering with," the voice snapped. "You think the law will protect you?" "No," Wolfe said. "Intellect will. You've already lost." A click ended the call. Wolfe replaced the receiver, his mouth curving faintly. "Archie, inform Kramer that the adversary has identified himself and intends retaliation. The courtesy deserves preparedness." I called, left the message. When I hung up, the office felt smaller, as if thought itself had tightened the air. "What will he do?" Marion asked. "Something rash," Wolfe said. "Men who believe themselves insulated often seek warmth in destruction. He will attempt to retrieve or destroy the ledger before dawn." Elsa's voice was a whisper. "He knows where we are." "Of course," Wolfe said. "He sent the first intruder here. But he will find this door locked, and this time watched." I checked my revolver, felt its familiar weight. "Then we wait again." "Indeed," Wolfe murmured. "And when he arrives, I shall give him what he least expects, his own confession." The house went still except for the faint tick of the clock and the rain beginning again beyond the glass. Wolfe leaned back, eyes half shut, as if listening to the rhythm of danger like a man judging an orchestra that dared to play his favorite symphony out of tune. The rain outside thickened until the streetlights blurred, a watercolor world framed by Wolfe's orchids. I stood by the front window, revolver in hand, pretending to check the curtains while watching the reflection of every small movement in the glass. Wolfe hadn't shifted an inch. The phone call had reanimated him. His mind moved, even if his body refused to. "He'll come soon," he said, not asking. "Panic breeds impatience." "And impatience breeds mistakes," I added. "Indeed, let us hope his are adequate." Behind us, Marion sat on the couch, her face pale but fixed, and Elsa had dozed off in the armchair, exhaustion stronger than fear. Fritz hovered at the edge of the doorway, armed with a carving knife that looked both ridiculous and sincere. "You want me to make coffee, sir?" he asked. "Brandy," Wolfe said. "For morale, not clarity." I poured 2 small glasses. Wolfe took his, barely touching it to his lips. "Archie," he murmured, "you will answer the door when it comes, with restraint." "You think he'll knock?" "He's a financier. Even his crimes must appear respectable." The rain sharpened on the windows. Somewhere outside, a car slowed, engine idling. I tensed. Wolfe's eyes opened, finding mine. "Now," he said softly. The bell rang. Not hurried, one measured chimes. I moved to the door, revolver behind my leg, and opened it just enough to see the figure under the awning. A man in a dark overcoat, hat pulled low, water glistening off the brim. His face was lined but untroubled, the expression of someone used to entering rooms that already belonged to him. "Mr. Wolfe," he said calmly. "I'm Charles March." "Come in," I said, and stepped aside. He brushed past me without a glance, removing his gloves with the precision of habit. The cologne was faint but expensive, the kind that preferred not to be named. Wolfe watched him with the mild interest of a biologist examining a specimen that had volunteered for dissection. "You saved me the inconvenience of sending for you," Wolfe said. March smiled faintly. "I was told you prefer efficiency." "That depends," Wolfe said. "Do you?" "I prefer resolution. You've involved yourself in matters well above your scope." "On the contrary," Wolfe said. "My scope includes the moral arithmetic of greed. You, Mr. March, are a particularly unbalanced equation." March chuckled once. "You think this is moral?" "I think it is human," Wolfe said, "and therefore solvable." He gestured toward the chair across the desk. March didn't sit. He placed both gloves on the edge instead. "You have papers that belong to me." "No," Wolfe said. "They belong to the late Alan Lockwood and therefore to justice." March's smile vanished. "Justice doesn't pay its bills. Harrington, Investments does." "Not for much longer," Wolfe replied. "You've stolen from your investors, laundered through subsidiaries, and buried the evidence under false names. You silenced your accountant, then your enforcer. Now you wish to purchase silence from me." March's tone dropped an octave. "I'm offering you discretion. You could retire comfortably." "I already do," Wolfe said. March's eyes hardened. "Then name your price." Wolfe leaned forward slightly. "Truth, Mr. March. I prefer it to money. It is rarer and less subject to inflation." That did it. The smooth mask cracked. Anger showed through. "You think you can destroy me with a few sheets of paper?" "With the right company," Wolfe said. "I can destroy you with a sentence." The silence that followed was so tight I could hear the tick of the clock inside the wall. March's hand slipped inside his coat. My revolver was up before he'd cleared the fabric. "Don't," I said. He froze, then drew out, not a gun, but a small envelope. "For you, then," he said. "One final offer." I crossed to him, took it, and tossed it on the desk. Wolfe didn't touch it. "I dislike sealed proposals," he said. "They hide indecency." "Open it, Archie." I tore it carefully. Inside was a cashier's check, $500,000. "Generous," I said. "Efficient," March corrected. "Enough for you to forget the name Alan Lockwood." Wolfe's eyes gleamed. "You underestimate me. I forget nothing of value." He reached for the telephone, dialed a number without looking away. "Inspector Kramer," he said when the line clicked. "You will find a visitor here who prefers to negotiate with money rather than truth. Bring a warrant." March's composure dissolved. "You fool," he hissed. "Do you know what you're inviting?" "Retribution," Wolfe said simply. "It is overdue." March lunged across the desk. For a large man, Wolfe moved surprisingly fast. His hand struck the bell beside him, and Fritz appeared from the hall, knife still in hand, eyes wide. I grabbed March by the collar and drove him back before he could reach the papers. He struggled once, then went limp, realizing the futility. "You'll regret this," he spat. "Doubtful," I said. "I regret cheap suits, not good causes." Kramer arrived 5 minutes later, trench coat dripping, patience gone. "What's the crisis now?" "This," Wolfe said, gesturing at March. "The architect of your investigation." Kramer's eyebrows shot up. "Charles March? You serious?" "Always," Wolfe said. "You'll find his fingerprints on the check, on the envelope, and on every document he denies." Kramer turned to March. "You're under arrest." March's voice was almost calm again. "You have nothing that holds up in court." Wolfe smiled thinly. "Then confess. It saves paperwork." Kramer's men led him out. The door shut, the echo heavy. Wolfe exhaled like a man finishing a long, unpleasant meal. "Archie," he said, "return the check to the inspector. I despise ill-gotten liquidity." "Too bad," I said. I was starting to like the number. Marion rose slowly. "It's over." "For him," Wolfe said. "For your brother, now his name is clean." She looked down, eyes glistening. "Thank you, Mr. Wolfe, for not forgetting him." He inclined his head. "Gratitude is unnecessary. Justice, however, is appreciated." Fritz began collecting glasses, his movements quiet again. Wolfe reached for his brandy and took a slow sip. "Archie," he murmured, "tomorrow you will see to it that the ledger is delivered to the authorities. And then, no visitors. You expecting rest?" "Sanity," he said. "It's rarer." I walked to the window again. The rain had stopped. The city gleamed under its rinse, pure for a minute before the dirt returned. I turned back to the room. Wolfe in his chair, orchids glowing faintly behind him, Miss Lockwood sitting with eyes closed, her brother's ghost finally at ease. If there's a better way to end a case than with the truth still breathing, I haven't found it. Kramer's car hadn't been gone more than a minute before the silence began to stretch again, the kind of silence that doesn't mean peace but recoil. Wolfe sat motionless in his chair, the smell of rain still drifting in through the front hall. The orchids behind him gleamed faintly under the lamplight, as if they too had decided to observe the aftermath. "You're not going to sleep, are you?" I asked. "Sleep," he said, "is the coward's interval between discoveries." He folded his hands on his stomach. "We have closed the circle, but not the line. March will confess, yes, but his admission alone does not explain who helped him to act unobserved for so long. He had Bates, Cole, and a collection of frightened accountants." He shook his head. "Clerks do not protect thieves at that level without direction from above. Someone else orchestrated the concealment." Marion, who had not moved since March's arrest, looked up. "You mean someone higher than March?" "Possibly parallel," Wolfe said. "He was a chairman, figurehead as much as manipulator. There may have been another hand turning the crank." I leaned against the desk. "You're thinking of Harrington himself." "I'm thinking," Wolfe said, "of opportunity. If March built the channels, someone had to authorize them. Greed seldom travels alone." Fritz entered quietly with fresh coffee. The smell pushed back some of the fatigue hanging in the room. Wolfe accepted a cup, but didn't drink it. "Archie," he said, "call Saul. Tell him to verify whether Mr. Harrington remains in his townhouse tonight." I made the call. Saul answered in the same whisper that had saved my hide more than once. "He's home," he said. "Light in the study, another in the hall, guard on the gate. Private. Keep eyes open," I said. "No heroics." "Wouldn't dream of it," he said, and hung up. Wolfe's eyes were half shut again. It is possible March was meant to fall. Sacrificial men tidy the stage. That's a fancy way of saying someone higher handed him the cyanide. Precisely. Marion rubbed her palms together, restless. But if March is gone, why would they still want to hide anything? To preserve the illusion of solvency, Wolfe said. Fraud is a religion. It survives its prophets. Elsa Granger stirred from the armchair, her voice still soft. I remember something. Just before Alan disappeared, a letter came to the office addressed to him. No return name. He opened it and went white. He tore it up, but I saw part of a seal, an emblem like a hawk. Harrington's crest, Wolfe said instantly. He signs private correspondence with it. Thank you, Miss Granger. That was the missing hinge. He rose. Slowly, but it happened, and that was enough to make me straighten. Wolfe only stands when logic insists on motion. Archie, get the car. We shall pay Mr. Harrington a courtesy. You're going out, I said. After 2 a.m? Yes, he said. He will not expect it, which makes it bearable. Fritz appeared again, alarmed. But, sir, lock the house behind us, Wolfe said. If the world insists on insanity, let us at least choose its hour. Outside the air was clean and cold, the kind that scrubs away exhaustion. I helped Wolfe into the car, and we rolled through the glistening streets toward Harrington's townhouse. The city was mostly asleep, but its lights watched us, curious. Saul's silhouette appeared from a doorway opposite the gate when we pulled up. Still inside, he said. Window cracked, curtains drawn. Alone, I think. Excellent, Wolfe said. You will remain here. We crossed to the door and rang. The butler answered in a robe, startled but trained. I flashed a smile and my best voice of authority. Police adjunct, Mr. Harrington will see Mr. Wolfe immediately. Something in Wolfe's posture overrode hesitation. Within a minute, we were inside, following the butler through a hallway lined with oil portraits of dead men who looked like they'd foreclosed on their neighbors for sport. Harrington waited in his study, robe tied neatly, face composed like marble that had once known warmth. Wolfe, he said, not quite welcoming. You choose curious hours. I follow curious crimes, Wolfe said. Your subordinate March has been arrested. So I've heard. A tragic misstep, but he acted alone. Of course, Wolfe said. So alone that he forged your seal. Harrington's eyes flickered just once. That's absurd. Not entirely, Wolfe said. Miss Granger recalls a letter to Alan Lockwood bearing that mark. I suspect it contained either a threat or an offer, perhaps both. Would you prefer to tell me its content, or shall I have Kramer do it? Harrington's fingers tightened around his glass. You have no proof. On the contrary, Wolfe said, I have everything but your confession. March has already admitted under duress that his orders came from a man above him. You are his only superior. That was half bluff, but it hit. The man's throat worked once, twice. You can't prove Wolfe's tone cut cleanly through. You ordered Lockwood's confinement to prevent disclosure. When March faltered, you instructed his removal. Cole failed. Now March is silenced. You are the last thread uncut. It would be efficient to complete the pattern, yes? Harrington set the glass down hard. You think you can come here and accuse me? I already have, Wolfe said. The question is whether you wish to survive the proof. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint hiss of rain on the windows. Then Harrington sagged slightly. I didn't mean for him to die, he said quietly. He wanted to go to the authorities. March said he could be convinced. I let him handle it. When the news came back, Your remorse, Wolfe said, arrived conveniently after your safety. He turned to me. Archie, the inspector. I went to the phone on the desk and dialed. Kramer answered, rough-voiced. Goodwin? What now? Package for collection, I said. Harrington. Address follows. Kramer grunted. I'm getting too old for your midnight deliveries. When I hung up, Wolfe was looking at Harrington with something close to pity. You might have avoided this, sir, but you valued numbers more than names. Harrington said nothing. He just stared at the ledger on his desk, a neat reflection of the one in our safe. Outside, Saul's car lights blinked twice, the signal for company approaching. I opened the door just as Kramer's sedan slid to the curb. It was over within minutes. Harrington offered no resistance as they took him. When the house was empty again, Wolfe turned toward the window, the dawn just beginning to smudge the sky. In the end, he said quietly, the arithmetic is simple. One man's integrity equals another's ruin. Yeah, I said, but it doesn't spend easy. He nodded once. Justice rarely pays, Archie. It only balances the account. The ride back to the brownstone was quiet except for the sound of Wolfe's breathing, steady as a metronome that knew it had earned a rest. The city outside was turning from wet black to gray-blue, street lamps dimming reluctantly as dawn began to sandpaper the skyline. Wolfe sat in the back seat beside me, eyes closed, hands folded over his middle, the faintest trace of satisfaction hiding behind his usual disdain for movement. When we stopped at the curb, I got out first, checked the street, then opened his door. He unfolded himself like a reluctant monarch. You may inform Mr. Fritz that I am now prepared for breakfast, he said. Eggs, cream, and silence. You sure you don't want applause? I asked. I prefer digestion. Inside, the brownstone felt alive again, warmed by the faint glow of dawn and the relief of survival. Marion and Elsa were still in the office where we'd left them. Marion rose the instant she saw Wolfe, a question already forming. It's done? He nodded once, slow and deliberate. Harrington confessed. Your brother's integrity stands unblemished. Her shoulders sagged like a curtain finally lowered. He'd be grateful, she whispered. He already is, Wolfe said. Dead men, Miss Lockwood, are free from the burden of gratitude. It was as close to tenderness as he ever got. She understood and managed a small smile. Elsa sat very still, her hands folded in her lap. Will they let me testify? They will require it, Wolfe said, but do not concern yourself with spectacle. Kramer now holds enough proof to satisfy even a grand jury's boredom. I poured coffee for everyone who wasn't Wolfe. He never took it this early, and leaned on the edge of the desk. So, boss, I suppose that wraps it up. One crooked financier, one martyred accountant, and one detective who didn't even have to leave the city. Your summary, Wolfe said, is crude but sufficient. He lowered himself into the chair with the familiar sigh of upholstery reacquainted with its master. Archie, record the case. Title it, The Door You Left Unlocked. That made me blink. Because she walked in through it? Because, he said, every betrayal begins with a door left open, literal or moral. Lockwood trusted, March exploited, Harrington entered. The metaphor's not wasted. Sure, I said, but if anyone asks, I'll just tell them it started with bad hinges. He didn't smile, but his eyebrow twitched, which is practically laughter in Wolfe's language. Fritz entered with a tray. Coffee for us, eggs for Wolfe, a sense of triumph for the house. He placed it gently on the desk, nodded to Marion and Elsa, and retreated without a sound. Wolfe tasted a forkful of eggs and looked pleased enough to let the world continue turning. Archie, he said between bites, when you deliver the final report to Kramer, ensure the ledger and letters are accompanied by notarized statements from Miss Lockwood and Miss Granger. The police will fumble less if their paperwork begins neat. Understood, I said. Want me to hand it to him or frame it as an early Christmas gift? Neither, Wolfe said. Merely watch his face when he realizes he owes me. The office settled into that rare calm that follows a storm, exhaustion and clarity sharing the same breath. Marion stood near the window, looking out at the damp street where the last of the rain still glittered. What will happen to Harrington? Prison, Wolfe said, or exile if his money retains its persuasive properties. The world has several comfortable cages for the wealthy. And Alan? She asked softly. Wolfe folded his napkin. The world has none for the honest, Miss Lockwood. But memory suffices. That did it. Tears, quiet and quick. She covered them with a nod, then reached across the desk and set a small envelope beside the coffee cup. It's not much, Mr. Wolfe. Just something Alan set aside for emergencies. Please, don't refuse it. He didn't look at it. I never refuse a client's gratitude when it honors the living, he said. But you will endorse it to the legal aid fund. Your brother would prefer that. She managed another shaky smile. He would. Elsa rose then too, more composed. I'll give my statement to Inspector Kramer today. Good, Wolfe said. Do not embellish. Truth requires no adjectives. When they'd gone, the house fell silent again except for the steady hum of morning traffic outside. I poured another cup and dropped into my chair. So, I said, we're back to normal until the next door opens itself. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. Do not tempt Providence. I was talking about burglars, not fate. He ignored that and reached for his beer instead, the breakfast variety. He took a slow sip, his gaze wandering toward the orchids. It occurs to me, he said quietly, that virtue, unlike crime, leaves no heirs. We must be their archivists. That line caught me off guard. You mean we're historians of the decent? Precisely, and the task is as thankless as it is necessary. I gave him a grin. Then I'll start charging double. You already do, he said. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and for a moment the office was just the sound of rain tapering to nothing and the clock asserting that the world hadn't ended. I cleaned up the glasses, straightened the files, and looked at the safe. Its heavy door closed again, this time for good. Whatever was inside belonged to the law now, not to us. Fritz reappeared, wiping his hands. Inspector Kramer telephoned. He says Mr. Harrington has signed a full confession. Wolfe opened one eye. So the arithmetic completes itself. He also said, Fritz added, that he will stop by this evening with beer. That earned an audible grunt. Then perhaps I shall forgive him, Wolfe said. Can I quote you? I asked. No, he said. The world would think me human. He closed his eyes again, this time for real, and the air in the room shifted. The investigation no longer hanging over us, the fatigue of victory settling in like the warmth of the first sunlight breaking through the windows. I watched the beam crawl slowly across the rug until it reached the desk, touched the half-empty glass of brandy, and flared briefly in it like the last spark of the night. Case closed, I said quietly. Wolfe didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence was his approval, and in Wolfe's office, that's the rarest sound there is.